He's Charles Robinson. He's Frank Schwab. I'm Jason Fitz. My voice just cracked. That's how you know it's going to be a good show. It's Inside Coverage where we break down the why and how of all things in the NFL. C-Rob wearing the Detroit Lions hat. We were just talking about that as we get rolling, but I should give you the platform here, my friend. Like, you've suffered for a long time. You have earned the right to wear that hat.
Tiger's hat. Tigers, not Lions.
Yeah. I said Lions. Son of a biscuit.
You said Lions. I don't want to be accused of being a homer, but it's okay. I'm excited to get the mic first because Fitz got a haircut, and I want to talk.
He was going to try to get away with that. Right?
Absolutely. No. We're going to talk about Paris Island Fitz. We're going to talk about Sigourney Weaver in Alien 3 Fitz.
Oh man, that's bad. See, this is badass. I'll take these.
We got jokes.
These are good comparisons. And yes, I went yesterday after I left the gym. I went to go get my haircut, and everybody, I've had the same haircut for roughly the last 15 years of my life in some iteration. It's always a faux hawk or a mohawk. And I walked in and I looked at my girl Sarika yesterday that's been cutting my hair for years, and I said, cut it off. And she just looked at me like, are you crazy? And I said, yes, just cut it off. But I've told no one. So every time I connect for the first time to do a show or see my friends, 3 different people yesterday said, are you okay, when they saw the hair? So I think everybody presumes I'm going through a crisis. I just want to be more like Frank Schwab, but I should point out, I have peach fuzz up here, Frank. So this says decision. Yours doesn't say decision.
Here's the thing. I have a right to be insulted here because of somebody who can't grow anything up here. I don't have any faux hawk, mohawk, anything for the past 25 years, whatever it has been. It insults me that you would take such a glorious haircut and just get rid of it. Now you just, it insults me. It just can't happen.
And Fitz, I want you to know I've been asking you if you've been okay long before you got a haircut. So.
Working with us every Friday has driven him to madness. That's the only takeaway. That's the only takeaway I can have.
The one thing I will say is that this speaks to my personality and my lack of understanding for anything moderation, because I did have smart people when I threatened to do this a few weeks ago. Smart people said, wait till after the Super Bowl, man. Like, you do less camera work. If you hate it, doesn't matter. Yeah, it didn't matter. No, once the seed was planted, it was going to happen. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So
yours is going to grow back, though. So let's just move on because it ain't happening for me. Yeah, okay.
It'll grow back quickly too. I can't I might not grow back though. I don't know. I kind of like this somewhere between like I'm sick and I'm in prison look. I don't know. I feel like I've got something going. It makes me look tough. That's what I'm saying. Tough.
There you go. Fridays with Charles and Frank. You feel sick and in prison.
Sick and in prison.
Oh my God. I can't believe I've become the intimidator on this show. Okay. Speaking of sick and in prison, that's how we all felt last night when we were watching Thursday Night Football. You want to talk about an ugly football game. And look, the Cowboys get the 20-15 win. If they had lost in beautiful fashion, we'd be losing our minds. So if they win in ugly fashion, maybe we should be giving them credit. But C-Rob, this game from the outset was painful. As a football fanatic, it was painful to watch this thing.
Yeah, it's one of those games where, when the Cowboys win it, my first thought at the end was, if they had lost this game, it would have been the most catastrophic tailspin start for the Cowboys because it was so ugly. The Giants they're especially if you take away Malik Neighbors, they're really not a potent offensive machine. The Cowboys, to me, I'm sitting there and I'm staring at some of the decisions, the Mike McCarthy, that whole field goal thing where he didn't call a timeout and it's like rushed and you're like, what is going on? Why would you not take a timeout there and give your field goal unit a chance to set up? And then Brandon Aubrey misses the field goal. That was like the one highlight the whole game, is you're watching Brandon Aubrey and you're going like, this guy is such a weapon at this point. But I made the joke, like, if they start working on the extension now, it'll get done by 2028 and he'll be making $20 million a year. That's amazing. Every star they have now. Yeah, you're like, it's going to take forever to get it done. It's going to be a blowout salary. No, I guess I just looked at it, and to me, I'm like, I remember when the Cowboys were an offense that felt pretty lethal. And that was only a year ago. It wasn't that long ago. Yeah. I remember there was a point where they felt very, it was a potent team. And now I'm like, oh, well, it looks like Rico Dowdle is going to be, finally someone who's going to take the reins from the running back spot beyond CeeDee Lamb. There's not a lot about the Cowboys offense that feels particularly dynamic right now. And then, the defense, we're kind of on pins and needles with Micah Parsons now and the low ankle, or, well, I guess it sounds like it's going to be a high ankle. We just don't know what grade of high ankle injury it's going to be.
Yeah, I think the one thing, it's funny because this Cowboys offense, we all looked at it the past few years. We're like, how does this operate? They really have one playmaker. They're not really great anywhere else, but well, hey, they're still good. Now it's kind of all catching up to them where you say, well, all they have is CeeDee Lamb. This is not really a functional offense at this point. I think it comes down to they can't run the ball, and that trickles down to everything else. Like, I mean, they just have no running game to speak
Frank,
of
that
whatsoever.
goes back to last season, though, too, right?
Yeah,
I know, but
back.
at least Tony Pollard was okay. I didn't think Tony Pollard was that valuable, but I guess he was because they have nothing in the running game. And it puts more pressure on Dak. It puts more pressure on the receivers. It puts more pressure on the defense because they're on the field longer. It's just really not good for them right now. And I don't know really how it gets fixed. They took this whole like running back is devalued to the extreme. Like they could have done something at running back this offseason. Instead, they were like, Zeke, $2 million, sure, whatever. It's kind of ridiculous the way they treated the running back position this offseason, and it's showing. It's really hurting them, I think. Brandon Aubrey, first of all, is there a better player at his position than Brandon Aubrey is as kicker
That's
right
a good
now?
question.
Like, is Patrick Mahomes a better quarterback than Brandon Aubrey is a kicker, right? Like, that's the kind of question. It's unbelievable how good he is, except right at the end on Wednesday, I need to take my little lap right here because Jory and Fitz both took the Cowboys, -5.5. I was like, well, I'll take the Giants. And Brandon Aubrey comes out for that field goal, and Al Michaels is making the jokes, and I'm sitting there going, yeah, okay, just get it over with. I'm Apollo. Drago's about ready to land the last right hand to him. And Brandon Aubrey somehow misses. And the Cowboys bettors, they're 85% of the money last night at BetMGM was on the Cowboys. Everybody had the Cowboys last night. And Brandon Aubrey misses. The first miss for 50 and beyond in his career. I think it was 16-16. Absolutely stunning that he missed that. It didn't matter to the game. But I come out of this game saying the Cowboys I feel worse about the Cowboys now, even with a win. I feel worse about the Cowboys. They couldn't put away the Giants. They couldn't cover Malik Neighbors. That's going to be a problem for everybody. Malik Neighbors is awesome. They couldn't run the ball. They just looked like a really, really mediocre team that just beat a worse team. That's all it was. They got to win. Good for them. It's better to do that at 2-2 than 1-3. But I came out of that game saying, yeah, you won, but it kind of reiterated this is not a good Cowboys team. Maybe it gets better. It's only September. We've seen teams improve after September, but I come out of this game really, really lukewarm on the Cowboys.
I guess my problem is what I can't make sense of. Let me say it this way. Is that to everybody's comments all summer about the running game, they really didn't have. I mean, Tony Pollard averaged 61 yards a game last year. So I kept looking at it and saying, all they got to do is replace 61 yards. Like that doesn't seem like that is, and they can't, right? It's impossible to me how bad their running game has gotten. And then the flip side of it last night, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Cowboys fixed their run defense, but the Giants couldn't get anything done. And when you think about like what a short week looks like, you play on Sunday, Monday, everybody's in the facility, Tuesday, Wednesday, at best you have a light practice and a walkthrough, and then you are in the game. So the Cowboys did not suddenly fix their run defense by having a light practice and a walkthrough. Let's not get it twisted. That means the Giants just couldn't do anything. And I'm looking at this Giants team just amazed by that.
Come on, Fitz. When you're looking at the Giants, right? I mean, you're going, wow, this team's a rushing juggernaut. Part of the thing that's surrounded the Giants this year has been, oh man, Saquon not being there is really noticeable now. Like this is,
Singletary's been okay. I'll give the Cowboys credit for stopping the run yesterday. They were a lot tougher than I thought they'd be.
Okay, they were better, but again, I don't think we're talking about a dominant running football team, right?
No.
Particularly when you're looking at Neighbors being clear the ace number one guy. If they didn't do a good job taking him away, obviously. I don't want to take that off the table for the Cowboys, but I will say this. When I went through training camp there, right, I sat there and I looked at it, and CeeDee Lamb wasn't in practice. And when you would watch the Cowboys in practice, part of the conversation I remember having with someone on the sidelines, I was like, man, these wide receivers do not look really very good at all. But once you take CeeDee Lamb out of this equation, they look pretty vanilla. And then I said the offensive line doesn't look like it's better. It looks worse. And the running backs look like they're going to be a problem all season long. So literally every single thing that looked like on offense that looked like was going to be a problem when you stood there with your 10 toes down on the sideline on day one is still a problem now.
Yeah.
Almost through a month of the season. And that's, to me, pretty indicative of there were things that did not happen in the offseason that needed to. And that is why Jerry Jones, when he comes out and puts the responsibility on himself for the Cowboys being where they are, I buy into that. It is his responsibility. The roster is kind of jacked up right now, and you knew it pretty early on with this team that they could be in this position.
Yeah, it absolutely true. But the thing is, you kind of alluded to it. They'd been having this formula before, and it was fine. Like Dak was great; he was MVP candidate. Like
12 years every year.
All of a sudden, it's just like this season's more like a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's really like, okay, now this is not very good. And again,
it's the 14th Xerox in a row, right? Eventually, you're just
eventually it's like, okay, now finally we've reached a breaking point where this is just not going to be good. And Brandon Cooks is a little bit worse, and really don't have a number 3 guy, and Jake Ferguson's a little banged up still, and the offensive line's out. Like everything just kind of contributes to that, and maybe they get better. And Dak's awesome. Like Dak is going to carry them as far as they can go. But again, this is just not the type of team that right now, as we speak, I'm really excited about making the playoffs or challenging anybody for the NFC East or anything like that.
So what am I supposed to make of Daniel Jones on the other side of this too? Because, I mean, Daniel Jones, if I had told you going into Thursday Night Football, it'd be 29-40 for 281. Did have the pick, yes, but I mean, you look at the numbers, and it looks like it makes sense. They just can't close drives. They can't do anything on 3rd and short. They can't find a way to get themselves into the end zone. They settle for field goals all the time. And I'm sitting here looking at Malik Neighbors, and, frankly, not only Malik, but like Wan'Dale was great last night, right? So you look at a couple of guys that are going, except for the drop, yeah. You look for guys that are just going off, and I'm still looking at it saying, but I don't know if Daniel Jones is really any good.
No. And he is what he is. Like if they had a good team around him, I think Daniel Jones could win games, but they don't have a good team around him, and they're asking him to be somebody he's not. He's just a mediocre quarterback.
If you look at how the offense is distributed with him too, Wan'Dale and Malik Neighbors, where are they getting a lot of these footballs? I mean, Neighbors can do intermediate and deep. He can do all that. But I mean, Wan'Dale, it's all short stuff, right? It's short and create. A lot of Malik Neighbors stuff is pretty short stuff. And I look at the Neighbors situation. They picked the right guy. You're like, okay, you went and you got the dynamic offensive weapon for him that he needed. Wan'Dale Robinson's been efficient, right? He's a piece, right?
Perfectly
so you're like,
fine,
all right, if you get a third piece here, you improve the line, you add some depth to running back. Maybe we can turn him into sort of an Alex Smithy Chiefs kind of career, right? Where we can generate offense with him. He can be potent, but he needs a lot of help surrounding him. Okay. So if that's the plan, right? But I don't ever think that offense, all of a sudden we're going to look at it and go, geez, man, now we're getting into the, offense that stretches well beyond 10. Now we're getting into an offense that stretches 5, 6, 7 passes beyond the 20. That just doesn't feel like something that's really going to develop with him. And you just have to decide now, I think, if you're the Giants, this is what his skill set is. This is what the build is ultimately going to have to be around him. And if they have done that, if Wan'Dale and Malik, that's the first signs of this is what the build is going to look like, I would expect them to add, a third piece to the wide receiving core. Theo Johnson, I don't know what the hell they're doing. I watched Theo Johnson track down an interception. Theo Johnson's 260.
Yeah.
That was one of the most,
Yeah.
It really was truly one of the most impressive plays last night. Is you see a 260-pound dude, a DB who's gone. It's a pick six. And all of a sudden you see a 260-pound tight end track him down from behind. I mean, and he had to run 30, 40 yards. I mean, it might've been longer than that to actually get there. If they can figure out, I think, how to work Theo Johnson in, maybe there are some signs of life for the Giants, but this is going to take time. This is not a one season thing. It might be a couple of years to build this.
I also, frankly, hated, I should say, some of the play calling. Like Dable, the 3rd and goal from the whatever it was, the 6th, this little flare route out to Wan'Dale. He never had a shot. My idea of 3rd and goal from the 6th is not. Yeah, you don't get your receiver the ball at the 5 and just hope to God that he can figure out a way to wiggle through everybody to get it in the end zone. I didn't like that either.
And what have we said all along about quarterbacks? Look, most quarterbacks in the NFL, most that middle tier quarterbacks, you can complete the 5-yard out and the short pass over the middle. You make your money in the red zone. and you make your money hitting a couple deep balls a game. And Daniel Jones just can't do that. We saw it last night when the money was on the table. Yeah, he put up good numbers, but the Cowboys always held. 3rd and 6, there's an incompletion. Here comes Greg Joseph for another field goal. In the fourth quarter, Darius Slayton was open deep, and he threw it to him, and it just hung up there forever and got broken up. And those are, look, the margins are so slim in the NFL, and those are the margins. It's, can you make that deep pass to Darius Slayton to get a touchdown late in the game and take a lead? No, Daniel Jones couldn't. Can you make those plays in Cowboys side of the field to get in the end zone and not settle for field goals? No, he can't. So that's kind of the difference. That's the difference between Daniel Jones and one of these other upper tier, Dak Prescott. Like, it just, everybody can complete, 5, 6, 7 yard passes and keep the chains moving. But Daniel Jones just can't make the difference making plays to make him a much better quarterback.
Yeah. In the meantime, that's going to be something that the Giants fan base continues to obsess over. But a big win for Dallas nonetheless, because as we said, 2-2 feels better than 1-3. All right, we'll take a look at some of the big quarterback stories around the league. We will do that when we come back, including Carolina, maybe some perspective we've all forgotten in this conversation. We'll do that next. All right, guys, let's get to the quarterback room. But first, I'm going to pull my soapbox up. We didn't plan to talk about this, but as we were getting ready, I just want to quickly vent on something. Maybe it's the haircut. Maybe I'm feeling like I'm a powerful big boy in the world. I don't know. I will say, as we hit this Friday, the last time we were all together was before, the three of us were together, was before my beloved Raiders blew a game against Carolina. We're about to talk a little bit about some of these quarterbacks, but I'm looking at Antonio Pierce, who came out and said, like, business decisions will be made, and nothing happened this week. I feel like I'm just in this situation where if I have a coach that I'm so totally in love with, and I've been in love with the AP hire. I think it's worked. Like, I understood everything about the AP hire. But if I'm in love with that coach because he's the great motivator, and then he comes out after a loss and says business decisions were made and we're going to make business decisions, and then I see no transactions, I see no indication, and I hear players talking about how they needed to air some grievances behind closed doors after 3 games. See, Rob, am I wrong right now to be sort of side-eyeing Antonio Pierce and saying, man, like, if you sold me on this bill of goods, I don't know that you're necessarily delivering on that bill of goods when you handle it that way?
No, and I mean, this is one of the things that we talked about before we started rolling tape. And I, in my experience covering the league, when you see players who take over as head coaches, especially guys that didn't have a ton of experience, I think spend years as a position coach and then years as a coordinator, and they elevate into these spots, I feel like they coach in a small frame. They coach like you are a player in the locker room, and players are often very reactive from one game to the next emotionally. Whereas seasoned head coaches, people who have spent years as coordinators, people who have spent years as position coaches, and then watched other head coaches operate and sat in all those meetings, they know that you really have to have a 2-frame mindset. Yes, there is the game to game. Let's fix the mistakes. Let's fix the problems. Let's grind the film. But then there is that second vantage, the second camera, and that is the overall bigger picture. And you have to know, okay, there's a 4-game set after this, and then there's another 4-game set after that, and then there's another 4-game set after that, and let's coach in these squares, these blocks, these 4-week blocks it used to be. Now, obviously, with 17 games, that's a little bit different. But my point being, I think we're seeing some inexperience on Antonio Pierce's part in terms of handling the larger scope of operations. And clearly to me, the first mistake is when you come out and you say this early on, and you say it into a microphone. I'm a reporter, and I love that, hey, you're going to air out business? Go ahead, air it out for us and give us something to write and talk about. I'm down with that. So he comes out and he says business decisions are made. But there was no definitive suggestion of where those business decisions were made. So what does that do? That takes everyone looking at your team going, uh-oh, okay, so who didn't do this? Who pulled up on a tackle? Who alligator armed a ball? And so almost instantaneously, I'm like watching social media. I'm seeing the fan base. I'm seeing some analysts, and it turned into a Devontae Adams conversation. And I'm like, my God, what a terrible mistake to come out and say business decisions are made, and everyone instantaneously focuses on your best veteran offensive player, who, by the way, seems to hear that outward criticism and will respond to it at times. That was such a huge, I think, misstep by a coach who doesn't have a ton of experience, a coach that I think was reacting emotionally in the moment and not seeing the larger part of the picture, where if you're going to say this, you say it inside the locker room. You have to keep this in-house right now because it's early. There's a lot of things still left ahead of us. And instead, Pierce did the opposite, and he kind of aired it out, but he didn't air it out in a way that it was obvious, so everyone's left to guess and pick at the carcass.
And everybody's focused on the business decisions line he had. The one I focus on is him not endorsing Gardner Minshew as his starter. As you talk about, Charles,
that's one, right.
Being reactive from week to week, just like going like everything changes week to week when you're mad. Gardner Minshew week 2 led a very good upset win over the Baltimore Ravens. He played well. He's seemingly very well liked in that locker room, as he usually has been throughout his NFL career. And all of a sudden you leave Gardner Minshew out to dry by saying, we don't know who our starter is. We're going to have to figure it out. Well, again, inexperience. You probably don't do that if you've had a lot of reps as a head coach, but he did it. And I wonder like how the locker room reacted to that. And it wasn't Gardner Minshew's fault. That was not a Gardner Minshew loss. That was not a loss where you come out of that saying, well, if they had better quarterback play, they would have won that game.
Right.
Everybody sucked for the Raiders that day, including Antonio Pierce. What I didn't hear in that press conference was, hey, yeah, I got pants by Dave Canales. Like, no, it was a lot of, we need to coach them harder. We need to, business decisions are going to be made, blah, blah, blah. Where was Antonio Pierce standing up there and saying, you know what? I suck today. Don't blame any of my players. Blame me. That's what a veteran head coach does. You hear it, even if you don't believe it. Veteran head coach, a leader at that position, comes out and says, that was my fault. Put that one on me. I didn't hear that from Antonio Pierce. And that was troubling to me. And also him airing out Gardner Minshew. I just, nothing about, like it was, like you said, Charles, great sound bites. I love that we had something to talk about this week. But when you really think about it, I thought that was a really bad look for Antonio Pierce.
Frank, don't you think that's the bridge to that player coaches cross eventually? Because I covered interim Dan Campbell, right, with the Miami Dolphins. And there was a lot of the, right, talk him up and coach him. And he does have that aspect to him where it's like rah, rah. Then he takes over the Lions. And, it was like when he screwed up the field goal, the first game of the season, they're going into halftime. They don't get a field goal off. And it's like, what the hell is going on? And Dan Campbell comes out and says, that's me. I messed that up.
Yep. He said, I let my players down.
Yeah, I let my players down. I totally screwed this up. And that's where you see the growth, right? But I think that came with time and experience for Dan Campbell. Like, the moments, especially early on, where you're like, I'm going to put it on me because that's where it needs to be right now. It's too early for me to start, turning outward and blaming decisions or being upset with certain miscues that are happening in the game. Let's be real here. The first month of the season, more than any, I think, is a coaching month. You're coming out of a preseason that doesn't exist anymore. The first month of the season is a preseason. So how well you're coached in those moments, how well a game is called, I truly believe matters more in the first month of the season than anywhere else. Go look in Jacksonville. Do any of us think Doug Peterson has done a good job calling games in Jacksonville? No. Has that cost them at times in this early going? Absolutely, yes. I do think there's a coaching premium in the first month of the season.
And how Fitz is just absolutely like, now that we've just trashed your team, the floor is yours, Fitz. Like,
Fitz, what are you shaving off next?
You don't want to know. That'll get us canceled. Here's the one thing I'd say. I've always been consistent on a head coach's team cannot be bad at the thing that they're most known for. So if you're an offensive head coach and your offense stinks, you're going to get in trouble for it. If you're a defensive head coach and your defense stinks, you're going to get in trouble for it. If you are hired as a motivational coach and your team comes out flat in one of the easiest on paper games that you've seen in years, in a game that you should have come out with the thunder of the gods because it meant so much for you, instead of being 2-1, now everybody has to realize that the Raiders are one weird fourth quarter comeback away from being 0-3 right now, and the world would be falling around Antonio Pierce. So maybe...
Okay, but Fitz, let me ask you this, though. Let me give you a counterpoint to that. You were looking at Carolina tape, particularly on offense. Up until that point, the offense looked completely different. So like, I'm sitting there and I'm staring at it. Was insane. I'm like, Andy Dalton stepped in, and all of a sudden, entire swaths of the field were available that were not available at all up until that point. And I'm wondering, I'm like, man, was this just what film did we have to study? Because we were basically studying an offense that looked like dog. And next thing we know, this guy walks in here. I bleep that out. Next thing we know, Andy Dalton walks in here and everything changes. It looks efficient. They can run the ball. They're accessing, like I said, different areas of the field. And oh, by the way, it was flowing through the wideouts. Carolina's offense was
Deontay
not a
was
wideout.
like, I'm alive.
Yeah,
every one of those wideouts on crossing patterns looked like Bo Jackson and Tech
It was
Mobile.
crazy.
Nobody could tackle anybody.
I ended up comparing the digital passing charts between Bryce Young in week 2 and Andy Dalton in week 3. And I think off the top of my head, I think Bryce Young threw six completions to wideouts in week 2. And I think Andy Dalton threw 16 in week 3.
Andy was dealing.
Such a different mentality offensively. And I wonder if the Raiders got caught a little bit flat-footed there because that's not the offense you were studying going into that game.
Well, you mentioned Dan Campbell, and I'll continue to yell this stat from the mountaintops. The Lions' win was their 9th consecutive win after a loss. They don't lose 2 straight. So if Antonio Pierce is the motivator that we expect, they better come out with the thunder of the gods against Cleveland. Let's take a look at the quarterback room, one of our favorite things to do. And I'm just going to flat out ask you guys a question because I'm confused. I mean, at this point, the Steelers 3-0. Justin Fields, starter. Frank and I said coming into this year that he was going to be the starter. I said all year, and Frank said he would be there for most of the year. Once he was the starter week 1, like, what are we doing, C-Rob? Why has he just not been named the starter moving forward?
I think Mike Tomlin's keeping the door open. I really do. I think
really?
Why? Yes,
really?
I do. I think Mike Tomlin is keeping the side chick. I mean, I think he's got his backup option just in case. You know, the girl from high school who keeps reaching out, even though, hey, he's engaged at this point, but he continues that conversation. I think that's who Russell Wilson has been for Mike Tomlin. And I think a couple of things happened here. Number one, Mike Tomlin did commit to Russell Wilson coming into the season. He did name him the starter after camp. He let the whole quarterback runoff happen, and then he named Russell Wilson the starter, and then Russell Wilson got hurt. And the thing that had to happen for Justin Fields happened. From game 1 to game 2 to game 3, the offense slowly opened up to him. He played more efficiently. He looked better each and every single game. And there were certain plays, big plays, huge passing plays, wonderful things that Justin Fields did that were taken off the field by mistakes or penalties that he had nothing to do with. So he wasn't even getting credit for all of the homework that he was doing and then putting on the field. And so I think there's that aspect of, okay, we're 3-0. It's hard to really look back at Russ at this point when we're 3-0. You don't want to change a winning thing. It's not broken right now. So let's just go ahead and let it do what it's going to do. And he's getting better from one game to the next in terms of not only his efficiency as a passer, but I think the way that he sees the field and makes decisions. That was the big thing, I think, in camp when I went through there and I talked to them about what the deficiencies were that Fields needed to work on. It was speeding it up and getting the ball out. When he's acting as a passer, don't be that half beat slower than maybe Russ ultimately will be. And for Tomlin, you're sitting there and you're looking at Russ and you're saying, okay, well, Russ isn't healthy, or at least that's the way I can play it right now. So I don't have to say definitively that Justin Fields is the starter, so that in week 5 or 6 or 7, if Fields hits a wall or we start to lose some games and it feels like there needs to be a little bit of momentum change, I can switch to Russell Wilson and say, well, this isn't a benching. I'm not benching Fields. I never named Fields starter. He was doing his job as the backup. I'm making this, we're going back to who our starter is because now Russ is healthy. And it's a seamless way for him to be able to make the change down the line if necessary without calling it a Fields benching. But I'm of the mind of you guys. I still think long-term, organizationally, if what you've seen from the first 3 weeks of Justin Fields is legitimate, that to me would be the quarterback I would want to have on the roster in 2025.
That's very interesting. And by the way, I did not expect Mike Tomlin sliding into Russell Wilson's DMs to be a breakdown. But hey, whatever, we're here. I viewed it as mostly Mike Tomlin doesn't have to, like you kind of said, like he doesn't have, there's no contract here at the media that you have to name a starting quarterback. He's like, I don't need to. So whatever. Like, and it keeps options open. And like you said, like if he needs to make a change, he can make a change more seamlessly. It's not a benching at that point. And but I'd be shocked if they go back to Russ. Now, again, this is a week-to-week thing, and Justin Fields has been far from perfect. Yeah, they're 3-0, but obviously that offense has not been very good. So maybe at some point, but it's very interesting breakdown. I don't have much to add because that educated me right there. I hadn't thought of those angles necessarily. Mike Tomlin's a smart guy. He's a great coach. He's probably going to Hall of Fame. He knows what he's doing here.
One other thing I will tell you from when I was in camp with them, when you talk to people in the organization, and this shocked me, frankly, how deep the scars were last year from the Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph experience. Like, they felt so trapped in 2023 with this offense where they were just like, we can't score points. We can't move the ball down the field. We are stuck in this tiny room that's, it doesn't have the size to lay down in it. It doesn't have the size to stand up in it, but that's our offense. Like, we're going to crouch through the entire season and hope that the defense can give us opportunities to win. That's why they flushed that entire quarterback depth chart in the offseason, and they moved to these two guys. And so I wonder if there is still, particularly with the coaching staff, this lingering memory of, yeah, this is better. And this is definitely a more dynamic player than the guys that we've had in the past, but are we scoring points? Like, are we still kind of stuck in that kind of offense last year? I don't think they necessarily feel that way, but I do think there are echoes of 2023 where they really wanted to get away from this idea that they could not have an offense that could roll up points. That it still has not been an offense that rolled up a ton of points in the first 3 games of the season. So I also wonder if they're like, all right, Justin will get us there. If by mid-season we're humming and we're clicking and we're 25, 28, 30 points in a game and it feels more consistent, then that completely changes the dynamic. But man, I'll tell you what, they were just so messed up over that quarterback situation in 2023.
Real quick, Charles, let me ask you real quick. Let's say they go to Indianapolis this week and lose 13-10 and the offense struggles again, which obviously could happen, and Russ is healthy. Do you think there's a possibility they just say, that they just make the change? Wow.
I do, because I think for them, there's also the sort of juggling aspect of it. And I think there was a mindset that, it's easier to start with Russ. If things hit a wall, we make the switch to Justin.
Yeah.
And then if we have to later in the season, we can make the switch back to Russ. I think at least prior to the season beginning, the more difficult juggle would have been naming Justin Fields the starter, switching to Russ, and it not working, and then switching back to Fields toward the end of the season. You want to, I think the bookend, you want the experienced guy to be the bookend on the back and forth. Whereas, Fields doesn't, at least it's not the same level of experience. But yeah, I think if they tank against the Colts, absolutely. And frankly, I think the Steelers fan base would be like, maybe we give Russ a look here. Like, let's at least see what Russ has got to offer.
I think also context matters on who they played. They started the season with the Falcons team that looked terrible week 1. Then they take on a Broncos team that I think most of us believe is not very good. And then they take on a Chargers team that didn't have Justin Herbert for a portion of the game, right? Like,
banged up.
And
really
in that process, they win 18-10, 13-6, and 20-10. So they have 3 ugly wins. They're 3-0, but quarterback, like, wins and losses are not a quarterback stat. So, like, this is the hard part of 3-0 versus 3-0 and an understanding of right now in a neutral field, could Justin Fields help them beat Kansas City? I think the answer to that is no, right? So, can they keep pace with a particularly high-scoring offense? The answer to that might not be no. So, a little bit of proof left to come. I'm not sure there's proof left on Sam Darnold, though, because, the numbers on Sam Darnold, and look, I can hear Nate Tice in my head just screaming, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. And he has it coming. He has that right. I have it coming because I didn't think that there was much here. But Sam Darnold at this point, completing 68% of his passes, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 117 passer rating. Like, it's not been good, Frank. It's been great. Like, Sam Darnold has looked awesome.
To the point of, if you're the Vikings, and I know there's a conversation for many months from now, but what do you do at quarterback? Like, let's say Sam Darnold continues he's not going to post a 117 rating over the full season. I think we all would agree to that, but I don't think this is going away. It doesn't look like it's fluky. He's just playing good, solid football with a great coach. I didn't think he had it in him. I'll be honest. Like, I thought Sam was going to get benched in September for J.J. McCarthy. But now you look at, let's say he continues on this path, and I certainly think he can for the rest of the year. When you get to February, you have a top 10 pick coming back from injury. You look good in his one preseason game, who you obviously were excited about. You traded up for him. What do you do? It's hard to then just trade away Sam Darnold because, okay, now we got our kid coming back because you don't know if he's any good. You've seen him play one preseason game, half of a preseason game. What do you think, Charles? Where does the Sam Darnold thing go if he continues to play down this path?
Okay, so I can give you like near term and long term context here. That's kind of interesting. Near term, that game, this last game, one of my favorite throws that Sam Darnold makes, and to me, it is very it represents the change that has happened with him. And it was in my QB room column. He throws a 4-yard touchdown pass to Naylor, right? And when you watch it, what's amazing about the play is not the throw's great, and he fits it into an extremely tight spot. I mean, it was absolutely a phone booth throw, right? But he gets to his third progression. You can see him get to 1, 2, 3, boom, make the throw and get it in there. And this all happens in the space of 2 seconds. Darnold at his worst, it was like, man, he is one read in panic. Like, he is not a guy who gets to his second read, and God forbid he's never going to get to his third read. Like, he's gonna take off and run, and he's lost his confidence in everything he sees around him. He doesn't trust anything that he sees around him. And I brought up the whole seeing ghosts thing, and that has changed. It feels fundamentally different. You see him going through reads. You see him dealing with progressions in that offense. And you're like, he didn't even do this at USC. Like, he was a great player coming out of USC, but that was part of his game that really needed to develop. So near term, you see the vital things that in his game that have come along, which is great for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, long term, Frank, as you said, that is a conversation to have much later. But if Darnold continues on this trajectory and you get to the end of the season, suddenly you're looking at a great record. You're looking at a player who's played far beyond the expectations really that you had, even though they were talking about, hey, we think he does have a Geno Smith kind of glow up moment still left in his career. If you've had a ton of success with this guy, the conversation internally, organizationally becomes, well, okay, we love JJ. We really love what JJ represents. But do we want to screw with this? Like, we feel like we've caught a situation here that is working, and it's not just working. Like, we could see this building and growing. And I'll give you an example. Years and years ago, I was talking to an agent, and he had a linebacker, highly drafted linebacker in the NFL, completely bottomed out in his first go round with the team that drafted him. He was awful. He was terrible. So this linebacker goes to another team, blows up, has double-digit sacks, looks great, is amazing, had signed a short-term deal. All of a sudden, he's up, and he's in free agency, and he's got an opportunity to go somewhere else. The money at the team where he had just had his glow-up, the money was not quite as good there. But the agent said to me, I want to keep him here. I want to keep him in this place. And I was like, why? Take the money. He can get the bag, a bigger bag elsewhere. He said, because it's working here. He has realized his potential here. And to me, that says we can get 3 more contracts out of this guy's career because we're going to keep him in a place where it works and his confidence level is at an all-time high. I think Darnold, you from the agent's perspective and the player's perspective, you have to consider that. Do I want to leave a place where I've realized and recognized my talent? And then I think from a team perspective, in some respect, you also have to think about that. We've got a situation that works. Do we want to tinker with it? And maybe the point of drafting JJ McCarthy was to get a quarterback who would lead us to wins that we believe in, that we believe's got a ceiling that's out there, that we can continue to build a player into a Pro Bowl, all pro level player. If you have that in Sam Darnold, you've answered the question. Why answer a second time? Why
he's still a young guy, right?
I mean, that's
remember,
26,
27.
You got 10 years left with him. I mean, and it should be noted, he signed a 1-year deal. So he's going to be free to go wherever he wants at the end of the year. So really for Minnesota, it's going to be, are they willing to sign him long-term? Are they willing to franchise him? I can't believe I'm saying that. And if they do, then what would they do with JJ? Like those are again, we have months to get there in the conversation. But C-Rob, you make such a compelling point. Like, it feels like even if he was going to move, there are a limited number of teams he could move to because he needs to be somewhere with an offense like Kevin O'Connell. Like, if he can stay in this language, in this system, in this universe, maybe he can continue to have that success.
Well, it's the Shanahan offense. Like, that's the thing now. He's 2 years into the Shanahan offense. He ran it 1 year in San Francisco, right? And now this is his second year in Minnesota, and Minnesota's running the McVay offense, which is the Shanahan offense. I mean, it's all sort of on the same tree. And The interesting thing about the Shanahan offense, when you talk to people involved in it, they'll tell you like a quarterback really truly starts to get it in year 2. And that's when they start to blossom. You saw that with, I think Kirk Cousins, when he really started to get that offense in his second year in Minnesota under O'Connell, he was blowing up. And then he has the season ending injury. So I think if you're Darnold, again, I want to stress to the audience, and all three of us know this, we know this is a premature conversation. We know that the wheels could completely fall off. And in November, this could look like the most moronic conversation ever. But let's go ahead and have the moronic conversation now anyway, just to think it through.
Says the guy who still brings up me talking about Cliff Kingsbury for Coach of the Year when he was 9-0.
Oh, you're wounded.
Go ahead.
You're wounded. Listen to this wounded guy.
That was a bad take. Go ahead.
So wounded. Trey Lance is going to be an MVP wounded.
Hey,
anyway.
That doesn't exist. That never happened. That never happened.
Okay. So let's look across the NFL and let's look at where Shanahan offense is being run, right? So you're like, all right, well, obviously San Francisco. Purdy has acquitted himself quite well, including when you took talent off the field. You played a really brilliant game. I think he had 8 completions, like 6 of them were like drops, without all that talent on the field last week. So Purdy, no, you kind of take that off. You can't. Atlanta, their OC comes out of running the Shanahan system. No, because you've got Kirk Cousins there and Michael Penix there. I think when you lay it out, you look at all the teams, there is a team to me that is intriguing. I think the Los Angeles Rams, when you sit there and you stare at their situation and you go, okay, they've had all these injuries. Let's say this is a really rough season. And at the end of this, and they restructured the deal with Matthew Stafford at Matthew Stafford's urging to provide an inflection point at the end of the season. Either Matthew Stafford goes, hey, you know what? I think I'm good. It's every season. It's an off-season decision whether or not I want to come back. Maybe I'm good. Maybe I played enough football and I'm ready to walk away. And so he can walk away knowing he got more guaranteed money pushed into 2024. He got another little bite of the apple before he hung it up. But then also for the Rams, it gives you the opportunity to go. And here's the thing. They love Stafford. And I don't think in any way, shape, or form McVay would want to trade him out for Sam Darnold. Like, I don't want to, have that asinine thought out there. But there is an inflection point offered by how that contract was structured. It gives you an out if you're the Rams. And again, you would be potentially with Sam Darnold. It is a player who played high school an hour south of LA. He started at USC. He knows LA. Like, this is his neighborhood. It would be going home for Sam Darnold. And oh, by the way, he's run your offense for 2 years now, and he's running it at a really high level. And if it gets to the end of the season with Minnesota and Sam Darnold has done something kooky and he has 36 touchdowns and 8 interceptions and, the Vikings won 13 games and you're sitting there, you're going, maybe we do need to look at this a little bit more. And people are going to think, man, that sounds so absurd. They forget what Sam Darnold was coming to the NFL. They forget how much he was a massive player coming out of USC. At one point, we all thought for at least 18 months of his career at USC, we're like, he's the first pick in the draft. He's going to be the first pick in the draft. And
not just a first pick, but not
generational,
right. But one of those guys.
Pretty close. Yeah, pretty close. So maybe that guy has been salvaged. Maybe that guy has really actually come to fruition on the NFL level. And maybe there is another team out there that's going to benefit from it, a la the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Baker Mayfield, where I was just like, what the hell's going on here? And now I watch Baker and I'm like, this guy's making throws that he's unlocked a level of play where he's not just a serviceable player. He's a good player now at the quarterback position. I think the Rams, you at least have to have that conversation if this season turns into an injury-riddled mess and you're sitting there staring at 7-10 and you got to make some decisions.
I also think it's important to note to all of this, one thing you said earlier, the goal is to find the quarterback. And no matter how you do it, if you found the quarterback, the goal is not to play Russian roulette with quarterbacks every single time. The goal is to find one. If Sam Darnold has this just absolutely incredible year and the Vikings have found their quarterback, the mission accomplished. Whatever happens, they'll do. That's a good problem.
If you do Russian roulette, you don't pull the trigger and it goes click and nothing happens and then you go, let me try that another time. Like, what are we doing here? Like you made it. You got off. Like, go ahead and pass it off and be happy with what just occurred.
Obviously, we're happy with where Sam Darnold is. When we come back, we'll do a little bit of stock up, stock down on some different quarterbacks across the league. We'll do it next. As we get into stock and looking at some of the quarterbacks that are up and down, there are some names in the down that I think I need to get tattooed on my new head, just because I say it so often. Cough, Will Levis. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, let's start with some stock up. See, Rob, you do this every week. Like, give me somebody that you're genuinely excited about stock up right now at the quarterback position.
Well, I'll tell you what. You know the names that I rolled out. You tell me. Give me the one that intrigued you most from the list.
Oh, Jayden Daniels.
Jayden Daniels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Okay. So let me tell you about. Let me give you something about Jayden Daniels, and I want to compare it to what's going on with Trevor Lawrence right now in Jacksonville. Right. So Jayden Daniels, I think part of what's happening with Jayden Daniels is, let's just remove the thing that we're most worried about, which is his frame, right? His size. We're like, geez, we don't want to see him get hurt because of what his size is. He is a dynamic runner who is a pocket quarterback. We have reached the promised land where we have wanted a joystick running quarterback who doesn't need to come around as a pocket passer. Like, this is, God, we've wanted this for so long. And then we watch him throw from the pocket and we're like, hey, this guy throws deep. He throws over the middle of the field. He throws to the entire, suite of options. There are tight ends involved. There are running backs involved. There's wide receivers involved. And they built themselves into that. They started off conservative with him, and each and every game they opened up the offense a little bit more. And then Terry McLaurin said, trust me, I am your guy. When I got one-on-one, trust me. Like, just give me that ability. This is how relationships are forged. And then you see against the Bengals, that touchdown pass at the end of the game to McLaurin, when you have a free rushing safety and you're like, all right, let me just go ahead and get killed here. Like, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to step into it. I'm going to take the hit. I'm going to plant my feet and just take it right in the face. But I'm going to put this ball up to my guy who said, if I'm one-on-one, trust me. And you throw the confidence ball and he comes down with it. And you're like, man, that is the kind of thing that builds such an immense amount of trust and and I think what's important about this is when Brock Purdy stepped in for the 49ers, you saw teammates respond to him instantly. And you're like, is this real? Like, are they really this behind this guy? He brought an element of fighting and, I don't want to roll out all these different cliches, but he just had that mentality, that the dog mentality. He had that mentality though that players responded to.
Got the dog in him, Charles.
Got the stupid dog in him. Anyway, but then there are quarterbacks who got that poodle in them. Okay, and I think with Daniels, you saw it when I'm on the camp tour and I'm watching him against the Jets in that game, and they send in a screen pass to Eckler, and he changes the play at the line of scrimmage, knows he's not supposed to. Yeah, uh-huh. He sees a go ball to Diami Brown. He throws it. He completes it. It's beautiful. He looks at the sideline and he's smiling because he's like, I'm going to get in trouble for this. Like, I just did something they told me not to do. Talk to the Commanders later about it, and they're like, no, seriously, we're mad about that. He's just not supposed to do that because we don't want to get him hurt. But he took it upon himself. And after that moment, you saw players who were like, man, this dude, he does not want it. We're in preseason. We're just trying to all stay healthy. And this dude did not even want to lose one play. So he audibles when he knows he's going to get in trouble for doing it. Dan Campbell called it the Top Gun buzz the tower moment. All these, I think all this stuff matters. And then I look in like Jacksonville and I'm like, when have I seen this from Trevor Lawrence over the expanse of his career? When have I seen this, like, hey, I'm going to go outside the boundaries of what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to be successful doing it, and I'm going to see everybody rally around me. Now, I don't want to bang too hard on Trevor because he did have a very successful year in his career. It wasn't that long ago. He did deal with injuries last season, so I don't want to pile onto this guy. But and I'm way over my skis with Jayden Daniels. But I will just say, through this early portion of the season, you are seeing talent as a player and then mentality as a player that as long as he can stay healthy, I truly believe the sky's the limit for Jayden Daniels at this stage.
And the one thing that I really want to point out about Jayden Daniels, I think I talked about this when me, Fitz, and Jory were together on Wednesday, is we talked all offseason about, oh, he's got to slide, he can't, his frame, blah, blah, blah. This kid is tough. Like, he has a toughness to him. He kept bouncing back up. Like, again, it's 3rd and 4, and he knows, well, this is one of the plays. I got to put my head down and get it. And he just puts his head down, gets it, takes a hit, and gets right back up. And that play to McLaurin, for one, somebody pointed out, I can't remember who it was in the course of the week, but watch when he throws that ball. You talk about trust. Terry McLaurin is not in position to catch that ball when Jayden Daniels lets it go. He is blindly throwing it up. Yep. He's blindly throwing it up, saying, my guy's going to be there. He said he'd be there, and he was. And again, Jayden Daniels knows I'm going to get blasted on this play, but I'm going to take the hit, and we're going to get the win. And he did. And again, got right back up. And maybe we haven't credited him enough for his toughness. Like, I don't want to see him get hit 15 times a game like he has been getting hit, but the total package is there. The confidence, everything. It is so exciting to watch this guy play. And this is his 3rd game. Like, this should not have come together so quickly for him, but it already is here. And I view this as, like, I said this Wednesday. I know I said this Wednesday. We're looking at this guy might be the story of the entire season, where we look back at the 2024 season and say, yeah, remember Jayden Daniels' rookie year? Like we do, hey, remember RG3's rookie year? Like, this is really something special happening. And I hope it keeps going, because it's so exciting and fun when we see a star develop in front of our eyes so quickly like this.
Yeah, here's the thing. You guys know how much I coveted him. I wanted him on my favorite team. Didn't happen. You've heard us all be effusive in praise with Jayden Daniels. Let's hear a little bit of what Tom Brady had to say about the quarterback.
Good recognition and ultimately a great throw under pressure. And I think those are things sometimes you really can't teach. And I think when you see plays like that, you realize the potential upside that a young player may have. And it's great to do it once, but with all due respect, you've got to do it every single week like that. And that's really what I get excited about. As anyone can make a play in the NFL, and I take nothing away from Jayden because he's an exceptional young man and player. But all these young guys, and they're only 3 weeks into the year, they've got to do it day in and day out in practice, and then week in and week out in the games, and then year in and year out. And I think when you see someone like Patrick Mahomes set the standard right now for quarterback play in the NFL, they should all be trying to emulate what he does, which is perform well under pressure. And those are the moments that you see that are exciting. And now it's a matter of consistency and how often you can do that.
So, Charles, obviously, Brady, when you are Brady, is going to be a tough judge on everything. I think it's interesting when he says, hey, the standard is doing it every single day. Well, you can't do it every single day until you start doing it every single day, right? Like, so I understand a little bit of caution, but I do think you can have both. You can have caution for, hey, I'm not saying he's a Hall of Famer, but you can also have optimism saying what we've seen so far in this body of work shows everything that people fell in love with in the draft process.
Yeah, and I mean, Brady does say, particularly that throw to McLaurin, there's an element of something there that can't be coached, and I think that's one of the things that Tom really liked when he saw it. And I know he spent some time working on Jayden Daniels, which is why I asked him about Daniels. But you also see and you hear from Brady that the greatest ones, the GOATs, you have to earn their respect. And they're not going to, they're not me, okay? I'm over my skis and I'm like, I'm going to get Brady's going to be so amped about this guy. And he's going to be, and Tom's like, hey, it's not my first barbecue, buddy.
Slow your roll. Let's
go ahead. Yeah. I love the kid and there's things I like, and I'm not slighting him at all, but Patrick Mahomes is the standard. How do you meet that standard? You meet it by going out and you do it from play to play, from game to game, from season, month to month, season to season. That is how you attain greatness. So I get it. I understand the perspective that he's coming from. And again, I think as an analyst, he's those teeth, the fangs are really growing. He's starting to get to that level where, yeah, I like it. I see that, but I get it. I see what he's saying. But to me, I just look at Daniels and I say, the Commanders are 2-1. They feel like a different team, right? They've just been
Frank's
beaten down
Commanders, yes.
Yeah, they feel different. And we've seen in franchises where we see the transformative quality of a quarterback who comes in and suddenly you're like, hey, this has changed. This is not what it used to be anymore. There's a certain corner that's starting to be turned here. That's what I think about it. It's starting to be turned. I will always hold my breath given his size, and there's some hangover too from the draft assessment. I'll never forget that video of like, here's all the big hits that Jayden took, and the one where he gets blasted and it's like Sonic and the rings all come flying out like of his body when he gets hit. Like that you never like lose that, and so when you get to the NFL level, you're like, just don't let him take that hit. Please, Scott, don't take that hit. Slide. And you saw it was funny. He slid at one point during that game against the Bengals, and you saw Dan Quinn, who was like yelling, "Thank you!" Like, thank you. He was so happy that Jayden Daniels slid feet first.
The one thing I would say, too, is I'll never forget the first time I met Herm Edwards, and I wasn't even in this business yet. I was still a musician. I was backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, and he was talking to a corporate event, and I was wearing a Raiders hoodie, and he was like, "So Raiders fan," and we struck up this conversation, and we ended up talking for like an hour. And it's funny that I worked with Herm later at ESPN, but the funny thing is, in that conversation, he said, "Let me tell you something that you need to know." He said, if you have a quarterback, you're going to be the greatest coach you've ever seen. And if you don't have a quarterback, you won't. And there's just this simplicity to all of it that I think we need to remember that right now it looks like Washington, we're not even talking about whether or not they got the right coach in Dan Quinn, because they seem to have their quarterback, and all of that changes everything.
And Fitz and Frank, I live in Houston, okay? And I remember last year going, wait a minute. like this is the Texans all of a sudden. You're like, we expected the worst. We thought, they're going to have, they mailed away their pick to the Cardinals, and it's going to be a top 2 or 3 pick. And then all of a sudden we're watching Stroud, and we're watching the organization, and we're going, and they, a new defensive minded coach that everybody, loved in DeMeco Ryans, and just like Dan Quinn, right? It's kind of the same. It's a very similar situation where in Houston, you're like, wait a minute, this quarterback is, oh my God.
It was that Buccaneers game, Charles. So like, if I remember right about the timeline of the season,
right.
where it was like, CJ's doing good. CJ's, and then a Buccaneers game happened where he threw for like 390 or whatever, and come back, and you're like, whoa, okay, something's going on here. And that's the way I felt Monday night. I was like, I'm watching something that I'm going to be remembering 5-10 years from now, unlike Thursday night when I'm going to forget that game instantly. Monday night was like, this is something happening in front of my eyes. Like, this is something really special when a dude can go 21 to 23, 91%. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, this is fun, and this is really, really cool. And everything he did at LSU is translating to the NFL. And it's fun when something like this happens.
But isn't the counter to this, quickly, Anthony Richardson? Like, we got 5 games last year.
No,
4 or 5
what do you got to
games
do to us? Like, I'm in a good headspace. I'm having fun, and now you got to be like, well, what about Anthony Richardson?
I mean, stock down on Anthony Richardson, because let's face it, he's looked bad this year so far at times.
Yes.
And last year, everybody got enamored. Everybody fell in love with it on a limited sample size. So I do think there's a cautionary tale. I would also say, though, what we're seeing out of Jayden Daniels, you guys have mentioned it a couple of times, is like, the best of what he did in college is coming through already in the NFL. For Anthony Richardson, exactly who he was in college is coming through in the NFL. Like, it's inconsistent,
I look at this stat. This stat was crazy. Like, Anthony Richardson's just playing different quarterback game than everybody else, not in a good way. Last season, Bryce Young had the worst completion percentage of any regular starter. He was at like 59.2. Every other starter was over 60. Anthony Richardson is under 50 right now. He has not reached above 50% completion percentage in a game this season yet. He's 10% percentage points basically worse than the rest of the NFL. Like, the worst quarterback in the NFL is still 10 percentage points better than him completion percentage wise. It's bad right now. Like, it's that old school, like back in 1973 when guys would throw 15 times and complete 6 passes, but they would all be downfield. So that was fine because you're running the ball all the time. Like, that just doesn't work in the modern NFL. He's got to get better. Like, it's a scary spot for him to be in, because he's got to make a big leap just to be kind of an average throwing quarterback.
Okay. Quick counterpoint here. He has not had a full rookie season. He's still in his rookie season, right? Because he lost 75% of his rookie season when he suffers a season-ending injury. So I want to see him get at least what we could think feasibly could be a slate of games that would account for a rookie season. Josh Allen played in 12 games as a rookie, started 11. His completion percentage was just a hair over 52%. Okay. And if you go down the box scores and really look at he had some dog games where I'm like, oh my God, I forgot. Right. I forgot some of these. Like, these are awful. So, again, I'm like, they knew what they were getting into with Richardson. And it took really 3 years with Josh Allen to form him into where he had turned a corner. And we're like, okay, now we're seeing a guy that really realistically is going to attain star status in the NFL. So I do want to keep that in mind with Richardson. But yeah, there's, and I'll go back to Frank the last time we talked about this. The interception in the end zone where it's I think it's 4 yards to go, right? They're 4 yards out. He rolls to his left. And I thought of Frank actually when I watched this and I watched it completely implode. I was like, man, would he have run that in the past? Would that have been like a completely different situation where he's like, hey, I'm going to try and get around this defender that's flying into my face. I'm going to get past this guy and I'm just going to muscle it in and take the hit and score a touchdown. Instead, what he tries to do is sidearm tuck it into the back corner of the end zone. It gets tipped, which initially I didn't see the tip, but when I slowed it down and watched it later, I saw the tip, which creates the interception. It was a bad decision from the start. The sidearm tuck would have been extremely difficult to make that pass no matter what. And we would have had to put it over 3 different defenders. So yeah, the processing, that whole thing, I'm like, man, this was just, it's just a hugely horrible decision to even do this. But I do have that lingering thought in the back of my head, like maybe he runs this last year. And how much has that changed what he's doing now? The fact that they seem to have taken a lot of that off the table for him.
Yeah, I still think Anthony Richardson has potential to develop into something. I think the Josh Allen comp is perfect. Unlike Will Levis, who's just trash. All right, I'm gonna die on this Will Levis hill every single week. Before we get out of here, Frank, dumb underdog picks. We pick one game every week that an underdog we think is going to win. I'm taking the Bills over the Ravens. I don't think they should be the underdog here. They're a 2.5 point underdog. I'll take Buffalo over Baltimore. The death of the Bills continually overstated. What do you got for us for an underdog pick?
I kind of want to go with the Buccaneers because I think the Eagles they're going to be really, really shorthanded. They got the bye next week. They're not going to rush guys back, obviously, into the lineup. But I can't believe I'm saying this. I wouldn't have imagined I would be saying this 6 days ago, but I think the Panthers are going to beat the Bengals. What have we seen out of the Bengals that they should be favored on the road? And if you're the Panthers,
4.5 points on the line. That's a big, and let's go.
If you look at the Carolina Panthers, I don't think that they're in that locker room saying we're a 1-2 team. They're looking at it saying we're a 1-0 team because our season started last week.
That's dangerous.
Yes, yeah. And they're like, let's go play again because we're excited now. You saw the bounce in their step from their receivers. You saw Dave Canales all of a sudden look like Dave Canales again because they have a viable quarterback. And this Bengals defensive line is still banged up. They're still the team that could not get Jayden Daniels off the field one time at home. I don't know, man. I don't know why the Bengals are favored by 4.5. Let's put it. The Bengals are favored by 4.5 because of what happened the first 2 weeks, when the first 2 weeks don't even matter anymore to the Carolina Panthers.
I didn't know Carolina played a game last week. I missed that. You guys can follow us on Twitter at Charles Robinson, at Yahoo Schwab, at Jason Fitz. Picked a bad year to go sober, y'all, because this fall is going to kill me. Emmy doing great work behind the scenes. We really appreciate her. Make sure you rate, subscribe, review, tell your friends, family, enemy. Tell everybody to hang out with us. We will be back Sunday night to recap week 3. Have a great weekend. Enjoy it. I hope your favorite team wins unless your favorite team is the Browns, in which case I hope they lose terribly.